little house, eggnog is a cherished and revered holiday drink with all its creamy, richly spiced goodness. Ours is typically alcohol-free so that persons of all heights might enjoy the delicious beverage unrestricted. That is, with the exception of a few times when I put my head together with our own Father Christmas, my dad, and made a bit of holiday mischief in a bottle, which mostly followed George Washington's supposed recipe for eggnog, and which, in and of itself, has enough liquor in it to elicit some justifiable questions concerning the to-dos at which this recipe was served. As there is no record of the recipe actually among Washington's things, is no real surprise. Plausible deniability would definitely be the smart choice here if you were serving this beverage to your guests. Also, limiting the use of matches in its presence would likely be a priority, unless a strong blaze was what you were going for. Mount Vernon sternly disapproves of this salacious rumor regarding its auspicious and historic resident. Nevertheless, the rumors persist. You know you've thrown a good holiday party when they're still talking about it a couple hundred centuries later. While George may or may not have perfected eggnog, he most certainly did not invent it. That took a few monks in the 13th century, who curdled some cream or milk they combined with spices, nutmeg, cinnamon, and saffron, with a bit of ale, wine, or citrus, and drank their concoction hot, for health reasons, of course. This posset, as it was called, became a popular medieval treat among the aristocracy, evolving by the 17th century to often include cream, sherry, biscuits, ground almonds, or eggs as a thickener. King William's own recipe involved 14 eggs, a quart of cream curdled with a pint of ale, nutmeg and sugar thickened to a custard over a medium open fire, leaving the final mixture a smooth, creamy, almost pudding consistency. By the time posset traversed the seas to make its debut in North America, it had evolved once again. With imported English wine or ale being expensive, the colonists opted for Jamaican rum in their version, making it a drink accessible to the common man as well as the aristocracy. And as the Americans are wont to do, by the 19th century in America, posset had become eggnog and was served over ice or chilled and was considered a drink of celebration. Except in California, where, according to Professor Jerry Thomas, himself responsible for publishing the first bartender's guide in the late 1800s, it was very popular as a hot drink. There's just no accounting for taste, Callie. What were you thinking? In 1815, President Madison's stepson and secretary, John Payne Todd, headed over to Belgium to meet with Britain's representative to ratify a treaty bringing to a close the War of 1812, where they celebrated their peace talks with glasses of eggnog. Eggnog was the chosen drink of celebration. And then there was the not-so-famous Eggnog Riot. Christmas of 1826 should have been a holiday filled with gentlemanly conduct and military dignity at West Point Academy. With Colonel Sylvanus Thayer at the helm of the military school, it had turned its ragged reputation around and become an admirable example of military decorum, with even the grounds of the school having been built up from its ramshackle beginnings to its more illustrious incarnation under his supervision. He had insisted that the cadets at the academy comport themselves well and refrain from alcohol and misconduct at all times, an expectation that didn't sit at all well with the cadets in residence. As a matter of fact, the closest tavern, the Benny Haven, had a bad habit of accepting personal items from the cadets in barter for drinks. Edgar Allan Poe, whose attendance at West Point didn't make it past a singular year, spent most of that time at the Benny Haven. Obviously, the military was not a life path he was enamored with. Anyway, several nights before Christmas, a group of cadets who didn't approve of their Christmas celebration being restricted to tea headed across the Hudson River to the East Bank to acquire bottles of spirits from Martin Tavern, thus assuring its stay a secret. Upon their return, they paid the enlisted watchman 35 cents to turn his head as they unloaded the 3 to 4 gallons of whiskey and hid it all amongst their belongings in the wait for Christmas Eve. Colonel Thayer charged 2 officers to oversee the barracks that Christmas Eve night, expecting that there would be a bit of nonsense in the work. Lieutenant William A. Thornton and Captain Ethan Allen Hitchcock. At some point in the night, the partying became so loud that the officers heard it and attempted to contain it. They found inebriated and unruly cadets in practically every room they entered, with Jefferson Davis, future president of the Confederate States, announcing at the top of his lungs, "Put away the grog, boys! Captain Hitchcock is coming!" Unfortunately, this warning came too late, as the captain was already standing in the middle of the room. Davies immediately complied with the officer's stern order to go to his room immediately, saving himself from being expelled in the end. Hitchcock turned to a cadet relief sentinel and sent him to fetch William Worth, the commandant over the cadets. Unfortunately, this order took a turn somewhere and returned to the cadets as a call for bombardiers, their nickname for the regular artillerymen whom they despised. And thinking their integrity had been insulted, because drunkenness is such a virtue, took to arms against the perceived invasion of their barracks, turning their rooms into shambles with broken windows, furniture, crockery, and the like strewn throughout. The entire affair came to an abrupt halt as the young men began to sober slightly, and the commandant in all his authority arrived on scene. Out of the 260 cadets involved in that Christmas morning riot, 19 were expelled, with Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee avoiding being removed by following orders without argument. West Point avoids recounting this incident in their Christmas newsletters, and for good reason, I suppose. Whatever the case, they sure gave the father of our nation some competition for the best party fueled by eggnog, while simultaneously making our own eggnog tradition seem a bit tame by comparison. However, a lot less messy to clean up, something that I can get fully behind at this time of year. We hope you've been inspired to go whip up a bit of nog for your own family or party, and that you'll try to keep the party to a low celebratory roar and avoid starting any riots. Until you join us tomorrow evening for our next Advent window opening. See you later.